Three women invited me upstairs. None of us knew that night would reshape how we saw each other forever. I hadn't expected the evening to unfold the way it did. We'd started downstairs in a cozy apartment that felt like a gathering place for friends and neighbors. Soft lighting warmed the space, half-empty wine bottles lined the counter, and gentle music wove through our conversations. I hadn't planned on staying long, but time slipped away unnoticed. Julia caught my attention. First when I arrived earlier. Not because she demanded it, but because she didn't. She moved with a quiet grace that made people naturally pause for her. Her hair fell neatly over her shoulders, and her laugh was soft, deliberate, almost private, shared only when she chose. Two, I'd noticed her watching me a few times across the room. Her gaze was steady, not timid, but not careless either. Claire was different. Her eyes sparkled with an energy that drew people into her stories before they even knew the plot. She gestured animatedly when she spoke, her hands tracing the air as if shaping her words. At one point, she leaned over to pour me a drink, her hand brushing mine with a casual ease that hinted she enjoyed testing the waters just enough to see my reaction. Then there was Emma. She spoke less, but her presence didn't need words to stand out. She leaned against the kitchen counter most of the evening, sipping slowly, her head tilted as if absorbing every detail before forming an opinion. Her eyes lingered longer than her words. When our gazes met, she held the moment, unhurried, until it felt almost too intense. The gathering had thinned out. The music softened, the room quieter. I stood near the door, debating whether to leave, when Julia's voice cut gently through the air. "You should come upstairs with us," she said, nodding toward the stairwell. Her tone was light, but her eyes held mine a moment longer than needed. "We've got better coffee up there and the view's worth it." Claire laughed softly and added, "And better chairs too. These ones are awful." She stood beside Julia, their shoulders nearly touching, her smile playful but her gaze steady, as if gauging my hesitation. Emma stayed still for a moment, then eased off the counter. She didn't say much, just gave a faint nod, her lips curving into a subtle smile that felt almost private. The three of them stood together, not pressing, not insisting, just waiting. There was no urgency in their stance, no nervous energy. They were offering something, and they seemed to know the choice itself was already significant. My pulse quickened, though I kept my face calm. The idea of going upstairs with them, all three, felt weighty and alive. It wasn't about the coffee or the view. It was about stepping into something unspoken but palpable. I exhaled slowly and nodded. "All right," I said quietly. Julia's smile deepened, subtle but sure. Claire reached past me to dim the light, her arm grazing mine just enough to leave a warmth behind. Emma, walking behind us, murmured, "You'll like it." And just like that, I followed them upstairs. The stairwell creaked under our steps, the sound sharp in the late-night quiet. My heart beat faster than it should have for something as simple as climbing stairs. But the air felt different, as if the night had taken on a new shape. When Julia opened the door to their loft, the shift was immediate. The space was unlike the downstairs apartment. It was open, airy, a single large room where city lights poured through tall windows. Lamps cast soft amber glows across the wooden floor. A faint scent of sandalwood mixed with something floral, maybe Emma's perfume, maybe a candle burning out of sight. "Come in," Julia said, slipping her cardigan off and draping it over a chair. Her voice was softer here, as if the space called for hushed tones. She moved with that same effortless poise, every gesture intentional. Claire brushed past me, her sleeve grazing my hand. She grinned as she reached for a coffee pot on the counter. "Better brew as promised," she said, her tone light. She poured into mugs with a flourish, handing me the first. Our fingers touched. As I took it, her warmth lingering for a moment, I caught Emma leaning against the far wall, half in shadow. She wasn't hiding, just observing, her eyes tracking every movement. When our gazes met, she tilted her head slightly, lips parting, as if to speak, then closed them with a small, knowing smile. That quiet exchange unsettled me more than any witty remark could have. I stepped further inside, mug in hand. Julia gestured to a plush sofa draped in soft blankets. I sat, the fabric cool under my palm, and Julia settled into an armchair opposite. She crossed one leg over the other, leaning forward, her attention steady on me. Claire slid in beside me, close enough that her knee brushed mine. It seemed casual, but I felt the intention, the choice to close the distance. She chatted easily, asking what I thought of the loft, what caught my eye first. I answered, but my focus wasn't just on her words. It was on Julia, her gaze lingering, her silence speaking volumes. It was on Emma, standing still, studying the seam, as if seeing layers I couldn't yet name. The loft hummed with more than light and voices. Every sound carried weight, the clink of mugs, the faint rustle of fabric. I felt surrounded, not confined, but drawn in, as if each of them had a unique pull, weaving me into the night's unfolding. The loft felt alive once we settled. The music downstairs was a distant memory, replaced by the low hum of the city outside and the occasional clink of ceramic. The room was spacious, but their closeness made it feel intimate, like we were in a bubble of warm light and soft edges. Claire broke the silence first, her voice carrying that effortless spark. She leaned in as she spoke, sharing a funny story about a failed attempt to bake for a neighbor last week. The tale was amusing, but I barely caught the details. I noticed more the way her knee pressed lightly against mine under the blanket she'd pulled over us. She didn't move away. Her presence felt like an anchor, warm and grounding. Across from us, Julia sat in the armchair, her posture composed, hands wrapped around her mug. She spoke little, but her eyes rarely left me. When Claire's hand swept, close in her storytelling, Julia's gaze flicked to the movement, observing not just me, but the space between us. She had a way of watching without judgment, her presence steady, making me more aware of myself. Emma had drifted closer from the wall, sitting at the sofa's edge, angled toward me. Her quietness was unchanged, but her presence undeniable. She asked simple, direct questions. "What do you love about this city?" Her voice was soft, deliberate, carrying weight without effort. When I answered, she didn't rush to fill the silence. She just watched, her eyes steady as if measuring the truth in my pauses. The three of them, so different, created a rhythm. Claire's laughter was bright, spilling into the air like light. Julia's silence was grounding, her gaze pulling me deeper. Emma's quiet questions landed softly, rippling outward, making me reflect on what lay beneath. I felt drawn in three directions, yet not in conflict. Each saw me differently, Claire teasing out my humor, Julia drawing out my calm, Emma uncovering my thoughts. Small moments wove it together, Claire's knee against mine, Julia's unwavering gaze, Emma's hand brushing my sleeve as she shifted closer. None of it was loud or demanding, just a subtle invitation I couldn't ignore. The loft wasn't just a room anymore. It was a space where every glance, laugh, and pause carried meaning. And I knew I wasn't the only one feeling the shift. At some point, the air changed. Maybe it was the second cup of coffee, the quieter city outside, or the way silence grew heavier between words. Julia rose from her chair with a grace that felt natural, not rehearsed. She set her mug on the table, smoothed her blouse, and turned to me. "Come see the view," she said softly, nodding toward the balcony doors. Her voice wasn't commanding, but it carried a pull I couldn't resist. I followed, mug in hand. The balcony opened to cool my air, the city stretching out before us, windows glowing, streets winding like threads of light. Julia stood beside me, close enough that her arm brushed mine as she leaned forward. The touch was light, but it steadied me more than the railing. Claire joined us, a blanket over her arms. "It gets chilly out here," she said with a smile. Without asking, she draped it over my shoulders, her hands lingering briefly as she smoothed it down. Her fingers pressed warmly through my sleeves, leaving a quiet warmth. I thought it would just be the three of us, but Emma appeared, leaning against the balcony doorway, arms folded, framed by the lamp's glow behind her. She didn't step closer at first, just watched, her eyes moving between Julia's arm near mine, Claire's hands on my shoulders, and my stance between them. For a moment, we were silent. The city hummed below faint horns, distant voices. I felt Julia's arm shift slightly, a reassuring presence. Claire pressed her shoulder against mine, casual but deliberate. Emma stepped closer, her voice low, almost teasing. "You look caught," she murmured. Her words weren't sharp, but they landed because she was right. I was caught in Julia's calm, Claire's energy, Emma's gaze. The three of them, distinct, yet aligned, surrounded me like currents in a tide. I exhaled, trying to steady myself, my pulse quickening. Julia's hand rested lightly on my shoulder now. Claire leaned closer, her hair brushing my sleeve. Emma stood near enough that I felt her warmth. It was the first moment I realized this wasn't about one of them. It was about all three, choosing to stand closer together. When we stepped back inside, the loft felt warmer, as if the night air had sharpened every sense. The lights glowed low, shadows deepening in the corners. The city was muted, a soft backdrop to the quiet within. Claire claimed the couch first, pulling the blanket over her lap. She patted the space beside her, smiling in a way that made sitting next to her inevitable. The blanket fell across both of us, our knees brushing beneath it. She didn't move away, leaning closer, her shoulder against mine, her warmth steady. Julia poured more coffee, her movements composed. When she handed me my mug, her fingers brushed mine briefly, a fleeting warmth that made me look up. She met my eyes, steady and knowing, before setting her mug down and sitting across from us. Emma didn't retreat to her corner. She sat on my other side, close enough that her thigh grazed mine. She folded one leg under her, angling toward me, her gaze soft but unwavering. She didn't fill the silence, her presence speaking for her, her breathing slow and rhythmic beside me. The conversation flowed in fragments, small stories, light questions. Claire laughed easily, her hand resting on mine as if by chance, though. I knew it wasn't. Her thumb traced gentle circles, grounding and stirring me at once. Julia watched, her attention steady, every glance deliberate. When Claire's hand brushed mine or Emma leaned in to speak, Julia's eyes followed, not with envy but with quiet curiosity. Emma's questions were soft but piercing. "Do you always let people this close?" she asked once, her voice barely above a whisper. The question lingered, pulling out an honesty I hadn't planned. "Not usually," I said, shaking my head. Her lips curved slightly, and she shifted closer, her shoulder pressing into mine, warm and sure. Between them, I felt pulled in different directions, Claire's playful touch, Julia's steady gaze, Emma's quiet depth. Yet it felt whole, each holding a piece of something I hadn't known I needed. The loft grew still, the only sounds the faint clink of mugs, the rustle of fabric. Every touch, every glance carried a deeper, unspoken weight. Time slipped away unnoticed. The loft was quiet, soft, as if the night held its breath. Empty mugs sat on the table. The blanket had shifted, but Claire's hand still rested over mine, fingers loosely entwined. Julia hadn't moved from her chair, her eyes steady on me. Emma stayed close, her thigh against mine, her shoulder warm against me. It should have felt overwhelming, being the focus of three distinct women. But it didn't. It felt balanced, like the room had found its true shape. Julia leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her gaze searching. "This isn't ordinary," she said, her voice low, deliberate. Claire and Emma stirred beside me. Claire shifted closer, her hand tightening around mine, grounding me. Emma placed her palm gently on my shoulder, her silence echoing Julia's words. I swallowed, unsure how to respond, but Julia's expression softened. "That doesn't mean it's wrong," she added, her voice almost tender. The room felt suspended. Claire leaned her head against my arm, her hair brushing my sleeve. "We're not pretending this is something else," she said lightly, but with a serious undertone. She looked up at me, eyes bright in the dim light. "We know what this is." Emma didn't speak, but her hand slid to my forearm, fingers curling gently. Her presence clear. When I looked at her, she met my eyes with calm certainty, saying more than words could. For the first time, I stopped questioning. I let the moment be. 3 women so different, yet moving in harmony. Julia's calm, Claire's spark, Emma's depth, each drawing me in, not competing, but aligning. Julia reached out, resting her hand on Claire's knee, the gesture pulling us closer without words. The warmth of it settled something in me. I realized this wasn't about choosing one. It was about all 3 letting me into their shared space. I exhaled, a quiet release. Julia's lips curved faintly, not expectant, just knowing. Claire squeezed my hand, quick and sure. Emma's fingers brushed my wrists, steady as a promise. The understanding was there, unspoken but felt. The night had carried us further than I'd imagined. Past midnight, the loft was steeped in soft stillness. City lights spilled through the windows, casting pale reflections across the floor. The 4 of us lingered near the door, no one moving to end the night. No one wanted to. Julia stood in front of me, poised yet gentle. She reached out, resting her palm on my shoulder. The warmth seeped through my shirt, steadying my heartbeat. Her thumb moved slightly, a thoughtful gesture, as if feeling the rhythm of the moment. Claire stepped closer on my right, sliding her hand on my arm until her fingers found mine. She wove them together with ease, her grip light, then firm, a playful squeeze that sent a quiet rush through me. Her energy was bright but grounded. On my left, Emma moved silently, resting her head lightly against my shoulder, her hair brushing my jaw. The weight was delicate, her breath warm against my sleeve. She didn't speak, but her closeness was louder than words. Together, they formed a circle around me, not enclosing, but embracing, complete. Each touch distinct, each presence unique. Yet aligned, Julia's steady warmth, Claire's vibrant energy, Emma's quiet depth. I looked at Julia, her eyes clear, certain. Claire tilted her head, smiling softly, her fingers tight around mine. Emma stayed against my shoulder, her silence. A quiet affirmation. For a moment, I didn't move. I let it wash over me, Julia's hand on my shoulder, Claire's fingers in mine, Emma's warmth beside me. The world outside faded, its noise irrelevant. All that mattered was the circle we'd formed. No one said the word, but it wasn't needed. The understanding was there. Whatever this was, unconventional, unexpected, extraordinary, it was ours. Julia's hand lingered a moment longer before easing back, her eyes still on mine. Claire squeezed my hand, her grin hinting she knew what we'd all agreed to without words. Emma shifted to look at me, her expression soft, certain, silent. Promise this was only the beginning. The door stayed closed. The moment stayed whole. As I stood there, surrounded by them, I knew I wasn't walking away from this, from them. Did this story resonate with you? What kind of quiet, real connection? Stories do you want to hear next? Share the setting, the tension, the silence. I'll bring it to life.